ladies and gents, not long ago on Carrot Corner, we featured a mysterious figure and showed you his yearly graph at 200 Zoom. Some of you in the comments were able to work out who this poker player actually was. He is, of course, or was, of course, the newest recruit for the subscription service that we took on at the time. Since then, we've taken on a couple more really strong professional cash game poker players. I'm super stoked about the launch of this. It's going to be immense. And that player that we featured in that video that looked a bit like this, I don't want anyone teaching you that's like half good at poker or mediocre. I want them to be able to prove their worth, not just with graphs, but through their own ability to articulate about the game. That player's name or screen name is Kruzer. I first met Kruzer in 200 Zoom when I battled against him and found him to be irritatingly solid and really strong and a nightmare to play against. I never forgot the harrowing nightmares of his avatar, who was the villain from Dexter's Lab. That's probably what you'll know this guy from if you've ever played against him at 200 Zoom. But in today's video, Kruzer and I discussed some really awesome hands that he brought to the table. He brought some hands that absolutely blew my mind. They're fascinating. I have to confess, I spent a load of this recording actually just absorbing his thoughts and just marveling at his thought process. I thought the way he puts theory first, but ultimately arrives at an exploitative conclusion and has a sort of procedural, formulaic way of analysing hands is just super impressive. And I had a lot of fun making this video, so I hope you're going to enjoy it too. And this is the sort of caliber of coach that we are bringing you content from when we launch the subscription service. And that day is very, very soon. Check the comments section for an exact date at the bottom of this video. All right, enjoy. Well, Kruzer, welcome to Carrot Corner. I've been excited to make this YouTube video for quite some time. How's it going?
Yeah. What's up? Hey, Pete. Excited as well to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to this. So I think a lot of people may already know you. We introduced you as a mysterious silhouette figure last week when we said, this guy, you know, a year in the life of a 200 Zoom crusher. And a lot of people in the comments said, this is Kruzer. This is definitely 100% Kruzer. So it turns out it wasn't that much of a secret, and people already seem to know who you are from watching your own channel. But for those who don't, tell us a bit about yourself. What's your poker story been like so far?
So, my name is Marko. I'm from Croatia. I played poker for, I think, 10 years or something like that. But seriously, I played since 2018. When I got my first poker tracker, you know, that's when I started taking like the grind seriously on the lowest limits. So I played Zoom most of my career, like 95% of the volume was Zoom. I started at NL2, played like million hands there, NL5, NL10, 16, 25. So I was moving up the ranks as the years go by, right?
Wow, that's insane. Like, that is the approach that I probably don't recommend to people these days, like starting all the way at NL2. I know hardly any people that have done that. So that's like really impressive that you've actually had the patience and the work ethic to grind up all the way. Why do you think you've always played Zoom? Have you never played regular tables? Like, you've never site selected or anything? You've just always played the Zoom games? Because some people would say that's a really tough way of trying to make it as a poker player.
Well, I really, the way how I see poker is, I've talked to a lot of people. They don't really see it as the way I do. I see it mostly as a game where I'm like trying to progress from the start, from the bottom to the top, right? So, and in Zoom, you just get like hands way faster. You get decisions way faster. I enjoy playing more Zoom. You know, I know like all the money is made in reg tables, like with the table selecting and that stuff, you know. But I just get bored. It feels like a chore. It feels like a, how do I describe it? Yeah, it feels like a chore when I'm table selecting, you know. I play for 10 minutes, then the fish leaves, fish dies, table breaks, so then I have to like sit there about 20 minutes trying to find another table, you know. I just lose the will to play the game.
I totally understand.
So yeah, I just like to sit down, click join table, Zoom, play for how long I want, play for 2-hour session, 3-hour session, maybe even longer, 5 hours. I had like insane amount of a grind time, like 10 hours. It was crazy in my career. But yeah, I just love to play the game. That's pretty much it.
Awesome. So it's almost like a computer game. It's like an RPG. You start at level 1, you level up your character, you go all the way to level 50, you kill the end boss, Linus Love, at the end of the game, the big dragon, and then you have
then you're done, yeah.
Then you have the credits, and then you play a different game. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really admirable. I think it's a really fascinating approach to poker. And one of the reasons we wanted to work with you, and I'm thrilled that you're going to be making, well, you've already made some content for our subscription service, which is coming towards the end of April. But I'm thrilled that you're going to be making this Reg Battles series, which is going to be awesome. It's going to be you at 200 Zoom, doing your thing in your element, bringing hand reviews that you've played against other regulars in the pool. Because you do get quite a lot of tough players in this pool, right? I've dabbled here myself, and you definitely see guys that play higher sometimes, stepping down. And I'd imagine that some of your opponents that you face on a daily basis are pretty strong poker players. So how have you had to adapt your game to deal with a pool that's probably just got a lot stronger over the past year or two, right? With the absence of 500 and 1K Zoom running and you know, problems on other sites.
Yes, definitely. I can even see now this year that some of the regs that were like, I'm not going to say like weak regs, but you know, that weren't that great before, like they all became better as the year goes. You can I see like a lot of better lines from them that I don't expect, you know, so I can instantly see that the opposition is getting stronger. And yeah, that just means I have to work hard, or I have to work harder than before to like be one step ahead, right?
Yeah. Awesome. And how would you describe your game? We'll see it when we get into these hands in just a second, but where are you on the spectrum of like solid GTO to wildly exploitative? Like, where do you fall on that spectrum?
Every hand I'm dealt, I try to think like, what's the GTO? First, I try to think of the baseline. What's the GTO baseline of the hand? Like, what's my C betting frequency here? What's my like turn barrels? On which turn do I barrel the most? On which river do I have to barrel the most, etc., etc. And then at the end of my, some people do this first, but I do this at the end of my decision. I look at the like player type, see if he's like overfolding, underfolding, who he is, like is he under 3 betting, etc., etc. And then I make my decision in the end after reconsidering that second option, right? So first, I always picture the GTO baseline first, even if I'm against the fish, because I really like this. I really like this sentence that a lot of people use. It's like, how are you able to exploit someone if you don't know like what's the best strategy is in the first place, right? The baseline strategy. You're just guessing. Then you're just guessing and playing field poker, right? So this is my approach. I always try to think about theory and what I think, what I remember about the spot, what's my heuristics about the spot, and yeah, and then I deviate based on the player profile in the end.
Yeah, I think that's a really solid way of doing things. I've definitely tried to make that the fundamental pillar of Carrot Corner, that you need the theory backbone. You need to be able to feel your way around the theory and sort of have your compass and navigate from there as a launch pad. But then at some point in the thought process, you should be saying, what's this player's actual strategy? How's it different from theory? What am I going to do about that? But you're doing it with full knowledge. I 100% agree that like the minute we start trying to exploit people without GTO, like the minute we go as far as to say something like, you know, screw this theory stuff, we don't need it at all, that's when we're basically just failing to play poker. We're kind of just rummaging around in the dark with thinking that we're exploiting someone, but we're not solvers and we can't figure it all out for ourselves. And having the GTO baseline is a massively helpful shortcut that grounds us and orients us in the game, and then we can feel for the differences from there. So 100% behind that approach, and that's our ethos here too. And let's see you demonstrate this in some hands. Let's have a look at some of these spots that you've played. Are these recent hands from 200 Zoom, I take it?
These are, I selected some of them from last month, some losing hands and some winning hands.
Nice. We like some losing hands. The chat's kind of the comment section, they're kind of sadistic, so they like to see people getting destroyed. Human nature, bloodlust.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens here. We've got 4 or 5 of spades.
What a punt, and then they like try to explain what I should do instead.
Even though you're like one of the better players even though you're one of the best players that's probably in this pool regularly, and even though we've just posted a sample of you making a good living from a really tough game, there's still going to be some guy that plays 5NL who's going to come on here and tell you how badly you played. So that's par for the course with YouTube. Oh, before we go any further, you already know this from your own channel. What's your channel called for anyone that wants to follow you on YouTube?
It's called High Elo Poker. So I made it at the end of last year, just for fun, you know, because I was getting tired of the grind. I was burning out and stuff. So I wanted to, you know, have some new goals, new ideas, you know, try to find some other people to talk poker with, and etc., etc.
Have you mainly worked on your own, like until that point? Have you been quite a lone horse in the sense that you've not been part of like study groups and stuff?
I've been part of some study groups, but mostly alone, to be honest.
Nice. For anyone that's, you know, wondering who Marco is, who Kruzer is, it's the bad guy from Dexter's Lab avatar. That's why I remember you as. Like that avatar gives me nightmares because I'm like, not this guy again. This guy doesn't make any mistakes. It's so annoying to play against. Like, I think that's the thing I took away from like the limited. I don't think we played that many hands against each other, but we've played a few, and I just never seen you really make a mistake. It's super annoying. So yeah, I remember that avatar. I'm sure a lot of people do too.
Mandark, his name.
That's him. Yep. He is like the epitome of the chat pro. That's what the chat pro actually looks like in real life. Is that guy, right? Like that's who's telling you that you should have folded there and you know plays 5NL. Only they don't have secret labs in their basement. Their basement is just like cobwebs and you know old board games and stuff. Anyway. We opened 4-5,
and they're using his laugh. You know, if you remember how he laughed in the series.
It's when they do the 3 crying laughing faces at the end of telling you that you suck at poker. That's it. Yep. All right, so we open. We get called.
4-5 suited. Yeah, I go for on this board. I'm gonna be using a polarized approach, so I go like big bet or check. I decided to c-bet my hand this time. I face a pretty big check raise, which I think is appropriate on this board because he's also going to be like polar. He's going to be raising 2 pair, mostly at worst, right? Deuces, tens. I think I have a pure continue with all my flush draws on the flop, so I go for a call.
You play any 3-bets here at all, or just all call?
Sometimes I do actually play 3-bets with, but it's kind of hard to balance. But against some players, I would play 3-bets with like stuff like queens, tens, maybe. Especially against this is an idea that I got when I worked with the new AI wizard with node locks and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, the idea is if he's going to have a lot of equity-driven bluffs.
Mm-hmm.
We want to have a more 3-bets in our range to charge those bluffs, right? So if he has like king jack off, he has jack 9 off, you know, even if he folds those hands versus our 3, even if I have a top set and he folds those hands, you know, it's still a kind of win for me. You know, I'm falling out whatever percent of equity, like 20%, even more.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the reason why I 3-bet like the most top sets is because I stack the lower sets. That's also going to be like his main value, right?
Yeah. And there's some urgency of value here in the sense that if you don't 3-bet the flop, there's some runouts that he like block bets a wet turn and then folds to raise or something like that, and we don't get it all against Queen 10. or whatever. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense, I think, to build the 3-bet range on this flop, but obviously not with this hand. Okay.
Yeah. Right. So he uses a big size, which is fine. I would maybe go for a pot here. But yeah, it's pretty big size. I think I'm just, maybe I could, if I still think that he's following all through with his like king jacks and stuff, jack nines, maybe I could shove this hand, but I don't think so. I would just like call it mostly.
Yep.
I'm still ahead if he has those hands, right? I have a pair now, so I'm in position. I'm just calling.
Yeah, and your hand strikes me as the kind of combo that will probably unblock river triples for the most part, like on a brick river or something like that. And so I don't think it's like a ridiculous proposition to say that this could even be like a bluff catcher on certain runouts, not on all runouts. So yeah, I think call makes a lot of sense here. And then we actually do hit the river, but this is a bit bittersweet, right? Because the opponent now goes all in. What are your thoughts here?
So this is why I include this hand, because this is really, from these positions, it's a really, really bad river for him. Because by this time in the hand, I'm gonna be the one who's gonna have more nut flushes in my range when I'm opening QTG, right? So my range is going to be way more filtered to those nut flushes compared to him. He's going to have more like king jacks. He's going to have more medium flushes, I'd say, that I won't call all of them on the turn. So for that reason, I think he should play mostly blocks on the river and not jam. However, if he does have a nut flush, I expect him also to jam and then have some bluffs that only include ace X of spades pretty much, right? So my hand is pretty much, it's a bluff catcher here. I don't beat any value. So he's saying he has a nut flush or nothing with his river jam, in my eyes, in a spot where he should block with most of his range, and he goes for a shove.
Yeah. Interesting. So just for context, is this one of the more solid regs in the pool? Is this a regular that you've played against before?
I don't have that many stats on him this year, I believe, but I think it's a regular.
Okay. So yeah,
one, I guess.
So the first thing for the audience here is just to understand why block is the case here. And I guess you just want to, as you've said, the 9 is a very polarizing river for your range, and it's one that you are going to have a massive amount of nut flushes on, not all of which are going to be taking this line from big blind. If we think about it, we bet call and then call turn with basically a massive percentage of our nut flush draws, whereas villain is going to deviate pre or flop at quite a high frequency by taking a different line, right? Which is why we're getting there with such a monopoly on those. And then because our range is now, I want to say it's polarized, not fully polarized, but like semi-polarized to like bluff catchers like aces and kings and queen X that were good but are now terrible, and then like newly made nuts. It makes sense that villain wants to go small into that range. It's like the newly made nuts or something that's just been demoted to being terrible. So it creates that polarization, which is a really cool point. I'm glad that you mentioned the fact that it's just meant to be block here. I think a lot of people watching this might miss that or not be aware of that. So is there any case for like exploitatively folding here? Or do you think that people are going to be like, do you have any thoughts on whether people could be under bluffing, over bluffing in this spot?
I actually gave this spot a thought in game. I tanked a lot, I remember. And maybe I thought that he won't really understand this spot. And maybe he would, let's say, teen value jam stuff like king jack off with king of spades.
Right.
Hand like that, that can go for maybe it's maybe it's a shove like in solver low frequency. I don't remember the solution or anything. But yeah, that's what I thought. I thought he would maybe have some thinner shoves in the end. So I realized it's a really gross spot when he shoves, right? Because of the reasons I just said, not flushes, stuff like that. But then in the end, as I said, I don't really have a lot of sample on the guy. So I thought he might like overplay maybe King Jack.
Yep.
You know, maybe Queen X flush.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And from a game theory standpoint, it's probably...
I mean, I lose to Queen X flush, never mind.
Right.
But yeah, King Jack off pretty much. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's quite the fold to make from a GTO standpoint, right? It's like quite the exploit probably when you're blocking ace-5, ace-4 and not blocking bluffs. And I think like your analysis is spot on, and I would even go further and say that if this isn't like a really established strong reg at these stakes, it's possible that they're actually jamming King Jack of diamonds here or something, because the SPR is 1 and they're feeling like, well, I don't want to check call, I don't want to check fold. So I think it's really easy for people to go wrong in this spot and for your hand to just be a clear value beater. So I'd never be folding here, but I just wondered like what your take on it was. So he does actually have the ace of spades Jack X, which seems like the absolutely standard bluff for the spot.
Yeah, it's really, really good bluff.
Yep. So
one of the only ones he has, to be honest. Like he might have, I don't know, some ace of spades 5 or something that has to like raise the flop some of the time, but that's really hard to find. So I think this is one of the only bluffs.
Yep, I agree.
Other than maybe ace king off if he flats that pre, but that's also like low frequency stuff.
Yeah, I think we're definitely in a world where if our hand is a bluff catcher, we might actually have to consider folding, but because of this like too thin value jam that's going on in pool, like we don't want to fold. But yeah, interesting hand for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so this one I go for 3-bet, I got 4-bet. Really aggressive reg 4-bets me. And this is where I think I made a pre-flop mistake, because I know the guy is really aggro, especially pre-flop. And my hand is a mixed 4-bet, mixed 5-bet jam versus a call 4-bet. These hands like ace jack suited, ace 10 suited, ace 5 suited are a mix. So what I would do, like against a really aggro guy, I would like shift those mixed strategies into pure. And yeah, I would make him fold if he has like ace queen off, you know, king queen suited. It has 2 live cards against me, you know. He's in position. It's a win for me if I fold those hands. Yeah,
even if you fold like 10-5 suited or something, like it's not, oh, he's called 4-bet, never mind, that's not in there. But even if you fold out like those bluffs, it's fine. I was thinking about the polarized 3-bet range when I said 10-5 suited, but the cold 4-bet range, as you say, does contain like 2 live cards pretty frequently. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
But this time I went for a call, so I called.
Yep. Maybe there's an exploit where the more someone is overdoing it pre, like the more we just want to take all of the EV right now, just grab all of that lovely fold equity. The pot's huge. I think sometimes people get stuck in a thought process of like, am I bluffing or value jamming when I shove ace jack? And I think that kind of question is like really misleading pre-flop. You just want to think about equity denial. Equities are so much closer together. It's not the river. Don't box yourself up, guys, into thinking about value betting and bluffing pre. Okay, so as played.
Yeah. Right, so this flop, I go for a check. Interesting, he checks back. So I have a decision now on the turn. I think I'm always, so his let's talk about his flop checking back range. So people might, there are some ace high boards that you have to check on in 4-bet pots. I'm not so sure in call 4-bet spots how often he has to check ace high boards. But let's say from like what would a normal guy check with in this spot? So it's like kings, queens mostly, right? Maybe some king jack stuff, right? So against that on the turn, I have a pretty easy value bet always, I believe. Especially when the card comes. When the heart comes, he's going to have those pocket 9s, pocket 10s with the heart as well that I get value from. So I decided to always bet my hand on this turn.
So this is an example of you using a pool imbalance. Like aggro guy checks back flop. Aggro guy is probably now not got enough air. has too much showdown value, has too much ace x kings queens, etc. Nines with a heart, tens with a heart. Don't check, don't mix slow play against ranges that are too strong. Fast play against strong, merged, depolarized ranges, right? Basically is the idea here. And that's an example of you knowing the theory, but then as you said at the beginning of the video, going off in a pure direction and taking a pure action in a spot that's probably just mixed in theory, I would imagine, although I could be wrong about that. But yeah, awesome stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So he calls the turn. And this rework improves him more than me, I'd say, because now he gets pocket queens with a heart. He also gets some ace queen off that might check the flop some of the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also going to be checking my ace queen off more than I'm gonna be betting. Like it depends on my suit. Like if I have a heart, maybe I would bet more.
Mm-hmm.
But the key part is I'm gonna buy. What I mean is I'm gonna bet ace jack way more often than ace queen. So he's going to prove to ace queen more, I guess. And then there's those pocket kings with a heart, pocket tens with a heart, pocket nines with a heart. And those revert queens, right? The set that I just said. So in this spot, I think I should mostly play blocks to put him in a tough spot with all his bluff catchers. Like let's say he has those kings with a heart. Let's say he has ace five suited. He's not really going to call a shove, and I can't really shove into a. Like he still might have slow played aces, right? We never know.
Yep.
He might have those queens that I just said. So I think I'm gonna have some shoves with let's say if I had pocket what's a good shove? Like pocket eights where I'm unblocked the ace X.
Yep. The two pair. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe jacks as well. If I don't shove, I think I'm gonna shove that pre versus this guy especially. So pocket eights, and then maybe 10-9 suited, king 10 suited, which I'm gonna bet on the turn some of the time. I think I'm gonna bet 10-9 suited way more because it has open ender, right? Compared to king 10. Those hands I would shove because they unblock my opponent's like best calls, right? They unblock the top pairs, sets, etc. And with these hands where I block the top pair, I think I'm mostly going for a block. And then he has a tough spot with defending ace, stuff like ace five, kings with a heart. Those pocket tens, pocket nines that I said he might have in this line. And he's a pretty aggro guy, as I said. So I thought he would jam most of those hands on this river. So yeah, I think in the end I checked. In the end I checked in the game because I thought he's more likely to bluff those tens and nines if I check than if I block and like try to induce him, maybe something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think that was in the end my decision for checking the river.
Awesome. So again, we have an example of a full theoretical analysis basically centering around the fact that just because SPR is one, and again, I'm trying to like think about how the audience might get this wrong, and like your poker thoughts they're really impressive, they're really great, and I'm just trying to make sure I catch the flaws in the audience's thought process that might stop them seeing the truth here. Some people might think at SPR 1 that the only option is check or jam. There's a lot of people I've taught over the years that think that way. And when you break it down like that, I think you've made it really clear to those people that it's your range's equity. It's how the equity of your value bet stacks up against your opponent's range composition that affects the sizing you should use. The fact that there are only 75 big blinds in the stack here doesn't change the fact that when you have ace queen or ace jack or something like that, maybe ace queen's a bit different, but when you have a hand like this, that your value threshold is only third pot or quarter pot, that's not got anything to do with the fact that there's, you know, SPR1. So very, very good thought process and very important stuff for people to understand how to build their sizing in these situations. Now, I like the thought as well that once you open the can of worms with 9s and 10s with a heart and stuff like that, I mean, these hands are basically irresistible to bluff here. There's like no way a competent aggressive reg doesn't just unleash here with those combos, right? There's almost no way. But because the value range is like fairly snug, he's saying he has queens, he's saying he has a flush that's slow played or something, like a king 5 suited or something that didn't bet flop. He's saying he has ace queen maybe. That's really it. And then once you start bluffing with those lower combos, the pocket pair plus heart or whatever it may be, maybe even villain has like jack 10 of spades that says, you know what, I'm going to make a loose 4-bet pre or something like that if he's really aggro. Maybe he even gets really splashy and turns some higher hand into a bluff. But yeah, it's easy to overbluff in this spot. So love the check call there. I love the thought about, do you know what, if I block, he might spew here too wide. But if I check, he's definitely going to spew wide. And then you've just taken that uncertainty about how he reacts to a block bet out of the equation by checking. I think it's a really nice final exploit there in your analysis.
Yeah, and he had that really insane hand.
Is that can't be a turn call, right? Like in this situation.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well. But I was surprised. It's actually a good play. It's I checked the hand and it's actually a call.
Wow.
Just so he can have some bluffs on the river, like this exact river. That's, you know, because and some of the heart rivers as well. So on a heart river, I think this hand has to call and then bluff, right? So you have some bluffs, and then I have to fold my 2 pair sets, you know, at the mix and stuff. So this is a really good hand to call the turn, which I was also surprised. Like first I was like, what is he doing? Then I checked the hand and
it's wild, right? It's even surprising that he checks back flop with that hand, given that he's aggressive. Now, okay, I know that players in this game can be quite good and quite capable of balancing their strategies somewhat, but at lower stakes, when someone checks this flop, I think it's important to stress that against a weaker player here, the checking range will be extremely weighted towards like kings and queens and away from anything like king 10 at that point. So I think that's just well worth pointing out. Okay, so let's move on.
All right. Okay, so 10-9 suited. Our reg also 3-bets me. I'm going to be calling really low frequency these types of hands because they're pretty bad out of position from these positions. So like these hands like 10-9 suited, jack 10 suited, queen jack suited are all going to be like low frequency just so I can have some board coverage, I believe, on some runouts, some boards, you know. So yeah, I go for a call.
That's funny. We actually object to board coverage as much of a relevant term at Carrot Corner. I would just say that, like, you know, the hand is break even at equilibrium and therefore can be included or not, but the frequency is obviously just low because that's what the equilibrium is. I don't know how much of a deal it makes, you know, when you're 15-20% of a combo instead of 0 and you have a bit more board coverage. Maybe that is a part of the equilibrium, but we kind of encourage our students to not worry about those things, right? Like, I think board coverage is one of these terms that gets like really overused by people sometimes, but I think in the way that you're using it is fine. But it's just one of these things where when people start doing minus EV things for it, it becomes like a huge problem. So as long as the audience understands this is like a break-even defend, I think that's what they need to take away from this first and foremost.
0 EV,
Exactly, yeah. Okay.
Okay, so he goes for a big c-bet, which I think he should do on these types of board. It's pretty low card heavy, and he's going to be pushing his overpair advantage. So he can even go bigger, to be honest, like 10, 11 maybe. My hand is mostly going to be a call versus this, but I'm going to be raising all kinds of stuff against a proper range that needs to like attack this board a lot with his overcards, with his vector, clubs, spades, etc. So like all my pocket pairs in between 9s and 5s with a spade would go for a raise. I would raise some of the jacks, 10s as well. And then my sets, some 5x, 9x. But this time I went for a call with my hand. Okay. So really good turn for him. I expect him to bet like close to 100% in practice, unless he has like jacks, tens, queens. He might like slow that. He might check that back, right? But if he has like any bluff, if he has ace jack of hearts here, I expect him to always follow through on a super good turn for him. And my calling range is, I need to be folding a lot because, yeah, because the turn is super good for him. I need to be folding all of my pocket pairs here, like most of them, to be honest. And then the better calls would be 5x, 9x, because I have pair outs. And my flush draws, my ace king if I have that pre. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Right. So maybe the
for my
way
calling range.
so maybe the way this can get overbluffed is if people don't realize that tens and jacks can actually still value bet on the king turn, given that the king is like something that you fold on the flop at probably the highest frequency against that sizing is like the king X of clubs, diamonds, and hearts. Obviously, diamonds not being possible anymore. So if you made me guess about whether this was overbluffed or underbluffed, I'd probably lean like slightly towards it being overbluffed, just because it's so incredibly easy to bet air, but not that easy to value bet all of the thinner value bets. But yeah, I think that's a really good analysis of the spot. Yep. So right. Calling, yep.
So we get a pretty brick on the river, and he goes for a jam. My thoughts for this spot is, based on that turn over bluff, I don't think in practice he will be able to control his frequencies on the river. So he's still going to arrive on this river with ace queen of hearts. He's still going to arrive with ace jack, jack 10, queen jack. And some of these hands have to check the river. Like if you have, I'm not 100% sure, but let's say he has jack 10 here, and he blocks my main folds, which are going to be those some of those pocket pairs that I have from the turn that didn't fold yet on the turn, right? So jacks and tens, pretty much always. So I expect people to, yeah, think that king is really good for them, and that they won't be controlling those frequencies. They won't find those checkbacks on the river with those types of hands, which they have to, like ace jack, jack 10, of frequency. I expect them to always barrel them. And then versus that strategy, my hand is not even break even, a mix anymore. It becomes a pure call.
Yep, 100% agree. When I first saw this river, my thought was exactly what you said. It was just because you have an advantage when a card first emerges onto the board doesn't mean that you have the same advantage after you've already capitalized on that by near range betting turn and then you've been called. So it's like understanding that the filtering of the hijack's range by calling the turn bet here is sufficient to eradicate the advantage that was gained range versus range on the king of diamonds landing on the turn. So given that people then have to say, I was in a really favorable world EV-wise, like my EV was more than half the pot. Comfortably, it was like 65% of the pot or something like that on the turn, if you look at the EV metric in the solver. By the time the call has happened and the brick river has come, it's back to neutral again, basically. And now maybe even a bit worse than that, because this is a good river for the hijack's range, and all of the semi-bluffs, the gut shots and flush draws that the bottom is barreling have all bricked. So if people aren't reacting to that, as you say, how can this not get overbluffed? Absolutely love it. And this is what you need to do, guys. This is why we're taking on people like Kruzer. You need to be able to piece together what should happen with what will happen. And if you can do that, it unlocks the door to actually, I guess, true EV, but true EV that's arrived at through a theoretical lens. So love the call here. I wonder if 10-9 is actually supposed to be one of your main calls in theory anyway. Like maybe it is a mix, but it does strike me as like, okay,
yeah, it's a mix. I think
you could easily have 2 10s or 2 jacks though and have 2 negative blockers instead of 1, and you've only got 1 negative blocker, which isn't that bad in a spot where you often have 2 negative blockers with 10s or jacks. So
yeah,
awesome. And we do run into ace 4, which feels like a pretty reasonable triple on this line. Yep.
Yeah, this one is good, I believe.
Yep, looks like the right kind of combo to go for it with. Okay guys, so we're going to wrap up part 1 here. And part 2 of this video is coming very soon. Stay tuned for that. Do leave us your feedback in the comments. We're not far at all from subscriptions launching. Kruzer's already made 2 videos for us that are going to be live on launch. So definitely look forward to that. But his Reg Battles series is also in the making, and I can't wait to see what that looks like when it comes out. You can see the quality of the analysis here. Stay tuned for part 2. Thanks a lot for coming on, Kruzer, and I'm looking forward to recording the next part with you in a few minutes. But for the audience, maybe that'll be in a week or so.